The silence in the first-class cabin of Flight 402 to London was shattered not by turbulence, but by the sharp, entitled snap of fingers. It wasn't just a request for a drink, it was a demand for displacement. When Bianca Montgomery looked at the woman in seat 1A, she didn't see the owner of the very airline she was flying on. She saw someone who didn't belong. She demanded the seat the staff complied, and the humiliation was public. But Bianca didn't know that the woman she was evicting was holding a phone that controlled the fate of everyone on board. One call later, the plane wouldn't be the only thing grounded. The recycled air inside the cabin of the Boeing 777 usually carried a faint scent of coffee and stale perfume. But here in the first-class suites of Aura Atlantic Airways, the air smelled of fresh orchids and expensive leather. Jocelyn Banks adjusted the cuffs of her charcoal blazer, settling into the expansive embrace of seat 1A. She was exhausted. The last 48 hours had been a blur of boardrooms in Tokyo conference calls in Dubai, and now finally the long haul back to New York. She wasn't just a passenger, she was a ghost in the machine. To the crew she was listed simply as a high-priority PAX, a vague designation that usually meant a celebrity or a diplomat. They had no idea that the PAX in 1A had just finalized the acquisition of Aura Atlantic's parent company, Stratosphere Logistics. Jocelyn didn't want fanfare. She didn't want the red carpet or the captain coming out to shake her hand. She wanted songs. She wanted to review the red file tucked safely in her leather tote bag, a dossier detailing the rampant corruption service failures and discriminatory practices rotting Aura Atlantic from the inside out. Today was supposed to be a silent audit. Champagne, Ms. Banks. Jocelyn looked up. The flight attendant, a young man with a perfectly gelled side part and a name tag that read Gavin, hovered over her with a practiced synthetic smile. His eyes, however, lingered a second too long on her hair, worn in natural braids, and the casual hoodie she wore underneath her blazer. It was a look Jocelyn knew well. It was the look of someone trying to reconcile the cost of the seat with the person sitting in it. "Water, please. Sparkling with lime," Jocelyn said, her voice low and smooth. "Of course," Gavin replied, his tone clipping the ends of the words. "We do have a limited supply of the Pellegrino. I'll see if we can spare one for you." It was a subtle dig. The cabin was empty, save for her. Jocelyn ignored it, opening her laptop. She had bigger fish to fry than a passive-aggressive steward. She began typing up her initial notes on the ground crew's efficiency, or lack thereof. For 10 minutes it was peaceful. The hum of the auxiliary power unit was a white noise lullaby. Jocelyn closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting her guard down. Then the commotion started at the boarding door. It began with a high-pitched, piercing laugh, followed by the clattering of high heels on the gangway. "Oh, stop it, Charles. You know I absolutely cannot fly if I'm facing the galley. It disrupts my feng shui." Jocelyn didn't open her eyes, hoping the storm would pass to the rear of the plane. But the footsteps stopped right next to her suite. "Excuse me," a voice said. It wasn't a question. It was a notification of presence. Jocelyn opened her eyes. Standing in the aisle was a woman who looked as if she had been dipped in gold and rolled in entitlement. Bianca Montgomery was a fixture in the tabloids, old money new scandals, and a reputation for treating service workers like furniture. She was draped in a cream-colored cashmere coat that probably cost more than the average car, clutching a designer handbag that was technically too large for carry-on regulations. Behind her stood a man who looked like he'd been defeated by life years ago. Her husband, presumably, and Gavin, the flight attendant, who was currently beaming at Bianca with an intensity he certainly hadn't shown Jocelyn. "Mrs. Montgomery, welcome aboard," Gavin gushed, taking her coat. "We are honored to have you with us again." Bianca didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on Jocelyn, specifically on seat 1A. "Gavin, darling," Bianca said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "There seems to be a mistake. My boarding pass says 1A. I always sit in 1A. It's the only seat with the proper lighting for my skincare routine during the flight." Jocelyn glanced at the empty seat across the aisle 1K and the 2 seats behind them. The cabin was practically empty. "I'm afraid there might be a double booking, Mrs. Montgomery," Gavin said, his voice trembling slightly. He pulled up a tablet. "Actually, no, your ticket is for 1K. The seat across the aisle." Bianca's face hardened. The veneer of charm cracked, revealing the ugliness underneath. 1K faces the lavatory wall. I do not stare at a wall, Gavin. I stare at the horizon. I want this seat. She pointed a manicured finger directly at Jocelyn's face. Jocelyn remained calm, her fingers resting lightly on her keyboard. "I believe this seat is occupied," Jocelyn said, her voice steady. Bianca blinked, as if the furniture had just spoken to her. She turned her gaze fully onto Jocelyn, her eyes raking over the hoodie, the braids, the lack of visible jewelry. "Excuse me." Bianca laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "I wasn't speaking to you. I was speaking to the help." She turned back to Gavin. "Fix this, now. I'm not spending 7 hours across from that. It ruins the aesthetic of the cabin." The air in the cabin shifted. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jocelyn felt that familiar heat rise in her chest, the ancient burning warning that signaled danger. But she pushed it down. She was the CEO. She was the power. She didn't need to shout. Gavin looked between the 2 women. On one side, Bianca Montgomery, white, famous, wealthy, a known platinum elite member who tipped well and complained loudly. On the other side, Jocelyn Banks Black, quiet, dressed casually, an unknown variable in his limited worldview. Gavin made his choice. It was the wrong one. Gavin cleared his throat, straightening his posture as he turned toward Jocelyn. The synthetic smile was gone, replaced by a look of bureaucratic pity the face people make when they are about to screw you over and claim it's policy. "Ma'am," Gavin said, leaning over the partition of Jocelyn's suite. He didn't use her name, despite it being on the manifest. "As you can see, we have a bit of a situation. Mrs. Montgomery is one of our most cherished frequent flyers. She has a specific medical preference for this seat." "Medical preference?" Jocelyn raised an eyebrow. She just said it was about the lighting for her skin care. Gavin's face flushed pink, but he pressed on his voice, dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Look, let's not make this difficult. I can see you're traveling light. I'm sure you'd be more comfortable in a different spot. We have a lovely seat available in row 12. It's premium economy, extra legroom, and I can offer you a voucher for $50 off your next flight." Jocelyn stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He wasn't just asking her to move. He was asking her to downgrade from a $5,000 suite to premium economy for a $50 voucher. "Let me understand this correctly, Gavin," Jocelyn said, closing her laptop slowly. "I have a paid confirmed ticket for seat 1A. I'm already seated, and you are asking me to move to premium economy to accommodate another passenger's vanity." "It's not vanity, it's protocol," Bianca interjected, stepping closer. She loomed over Jocelyn, her perfume overpowering the scent of the orchids. And frankly, it's about class. Some people know how to behave in first class, and some people just take up space. You're making the cabin feel crowded. Jocelyn turned her gaze to Bianca. Mrs. Montgomery, is it I suggest you take your assigned seat in 1K? It's identical to this one. It is not identical, Bianca shrieked. I will not have my view obstructed by you. She turned to Gavin, her face turning a blotchy red. Get the purser. Get the captain. I want this woman removed. I don't feel safe flying with her. She's being aggressive, the aggressive card. Jocelyn almost laughed. She hadn't raised her voice above a conversational volume. She hadn't moved. But to people like Bianca, a black woman's refusal to submit was inherently aggressive. I'll get the lead purser, Gavin said, panic edging into his voice. He hurried toward the galley. Bianca smirked, crossing her arms. You're going to regret this. Do you know who my husband is? He plays golf with the CEO of this airline. I can have you banned from flying. I can have you arrested for trespassing. Jocelyn didn't respond. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She didn't unlock it yet. She just held it. Moments later, Gavin returned with the lead purser, a tall woman named Sheila. Sheila had a hard face and eyes that looked like they had seen everything and cared about nothing. She took one look at Bianca and then at Jocelyn, and her calculation was instantaneous. What seems to be the problem? Sheila asked, though her tone suggested she had already decided on the solution. This person is refusing to vacate my seat, Bianca lied smoothly. And she threatened me. I did no such thing, Jocelyn said calmly. I simply refuse to move from the seat I paid for. Sheila turned to Jocelyn. Her voice was icy. Ma'am, on this aircraft, we prioritize the comfort of our global elite members. If Mrs. Montgomery feels threatened, we have to take that seriously. Now, Gavin offered you a seat in premium economy. I'm going to instruct you to take it. If you continue to cause a disturbance, we will have to escort you off the plane entirely. Is that a threat? Jocelyn asked. It's a reality, Sheila snapped. We have a flight to catch. You are delaying departure. Grab your bag and move. Now. Jocelyn looked at Gavin, who was smirking behind Sheila. She looked at Bianca, who was checking her reflection in her compact mirror, already bored with the destruction she had caused. You're making a mistake, Jocelyn said softly. A very expensive mistake. The only mistake, Bianca muttered, was letting you through security. Sheila stepped into the suite, reaching for Jocelyn's bag. I'll help you with this. Don't touch my property, Jocelyn said, her voice sharpening like a blade. Sheila recoiled, then straightened up, her face furious. That's it. Gavin, call the gate agents. Call security. Tell them we have a non-compliant passenger who is refusing crew instructions. I want her off this plane. Gavin practically ran to the interphone. Captain, we have a situation in first, requesting police assistance at the gate. Jocelyn sat back. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She watched them. She watched as two burly airport security officers and a frantic gate agent named Brenda marched down the jet bridge. Ma'am, you need to come with us, the lead officer said, hand resting near his belt. The other passengers were boarding now, filing past the first-class cabin, craning their necks to see the drama. Look at her, Bianca whispered loudly to a passing couple, trying to sneak into first class, probably used a stolen credit card. Jocelyn stood up. She smoothed her blazer. She picked up her tote bag containing the red file. I will deplane, Jocelyn said, her voice carrying through the silent cabin. But understand this, once I step off this aircraft, this plane does not take off. And none of you, She swept her gaze from Gavin to Sheila to Bianca. "We'll have a job by the time the sun sets." Yeah. Tell it to the cops, honey." Sheila scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. Jocelyn walked off the plane, head held high, flanked by security. As she stepped back into the terminal, the cool air hitting her face, she unlocked her phone. She didn't dial customer service. She didn't dial a lawyer. She dialed a private number. It rang once. "Arthur," Jocelyn said into the phone, her voice deadly calm. "It's Jocelyn. Initiate Protocol 0 immediately, and tell the board of directors to meet me at Gate B4. I'm shutting down Flight 402. Arthur Pendleton, the current acting CEO of Aura Atlantic. The man who answered to Jocelyn didn't ask why. He simply said, "Yes, Ms. Banks. Consider it done." Jocelyn hung up and turned to look at the plane through the glass. The war had just begun. The glass wall of Gate B4 was cold against Jocelyn's back. She stood alone near the boarding desk, her presence ignored by the swarm of passengers rushing to make the final boarding call. To them, she was just another person, left behind, a reject, someone who had failed the unseen tests of the airport ecosystem. Inside the jet bridge, the heavy steel door of the aircraft thudded shut. The muffled sound of the locking mechanism echoed like a gavel striking a sounding block. Bianca Montgomery was now safely ensconced in Seat 1A, sipping the vintage champagne that had been denied to Jocelyn, secretly gloating to her husband about how she had cleaned up the neighborhood. Brenda, the gate agent who had assisted the security team, sat behind her podium, typing furiously. She glanced up at Jocelyn with a look of disdain. "You can't loiter here." Brenda snapped, her voice tinny and irritated. "Security released you, which is a miracle, considering the scene you caused. But you need to go to the rebooking desk in Terminal A. We are closing the flight." Jocelyn didn't move. She didn't even blink. She watched the plane. The tug vehicle had already attached itself to the front landing gear. The engines of the massive Boeing 777 were beginning their slow, whining spool-up sequence. "I said, move," Brenda barked, standing up. "Or do I need to call the officers back? I wouldn't worry about me, Brenda." Jocelyn said, her voice cutting through the noise of the terminal. "I'd worry about why that phone on your desk is about to ring." Brenda rolled her eyes. "You're delusional. Go home." As if on cue, the red landline phone on Brenda's desk, the dedicated line for operations control, began to scream. It wasn't the standard ringtone. It was the emergency chime, a jarring, discordant sound that made Brenda jump. She stared at it for a second, confused. That line only rang for security threats or mechanical failures. She picked it up. "Gate B4, Brenda speaking." Jocelyn watched Brenda's face. It was a study in collapsing structural integrity. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving them a pasty gray. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She gripped the receiver so hard, her knuckles turned white. "What?" "But we're pushing back. The doors are armed. We can't..." Brenda stammered, listening to the voice on the other end. "Who authorized this?" "The CEO, but he's in London." "What do you mean? The chair is here." Brenda looked up. Her eyes met Jocelyn's. Fear, primal and raw, flooded her gaze. Yes, sir. Immediate stop." "I understand." Brenda slammed the phone down and grabbed her radio. "Ramp control, this is Gate B4. Stop the pushback. Do not push, repeat. Stop the pushback immediately. Ground the aircraft." Outside the tug. Driver slammed on the brakes. The massive plane jolted the sudden stop, visible even through the glass. Inside the cabin, champagne flutes would be sliding off tables. "What did you do?" Brenda whispered, staring at Jocelyn as if she were a witch who had cast a hex. "I didn't do anything," Jocelyn replied, checking her watch. "I just made a correction. You have 5 minutes to get the jet bridge reconnected. My team doesn't like to wait." "Your team?" Before Brenda could ask another question, the terminal doors at the far end of the concourse swung open. It wasn't security this time. It was a phalanx of suits. 6 men and women, dressed in the kind of tailoring that costs more than a pilot's annual salary, marched down the center of the walkway. They moved with the synchronized urgency of predators. Leading them was Arthur Pendleton, the acting CEO of Aura Atlantic. He looked terrified. He was clutching a tablet to his chest like a shield. Passengers in the waiting area parted like the Red Sea. The air of authority coming off the group was palpable. They didn't look at the gate agents. They didn't look at the confused travelers. They looked straight at the woman in the hoodie, standing by the window. Arthur Pendleton reached Jocelyn and stopped. He was breathless sweat beading on his forehead, despite the air conditioning. "Ms. Banks," Arthur said, bowing his head slightly, a gesture of submission that sent a shockwave through the onlookers. "I got here as fast as I could. The board is on the video link. We've halted all outbound operations from this terminal, as per your directive." Brenda, standing behind the podium, dropped her radio. It clattered loudly on the floor. "Arthur," Jocelyn said, her voice cool, "you're late by 2 minutes." "Traffic, ma'am. I apologize," Arthur said, his voice trembling. "We have the files. We have the legal team on standby. What are your orders?" Jocelyn turned back to the window, looking at the plane. "That aircraft is currently holding my seat, and it is also holding a crew that has violated Article 4 of our corporate charter regarding discrimination and passenger harassment. I want the plane brought back to the gate. I want the doors opened. And I want the entire crew flight deck and cabin offloaded for immediate inquiry." "And the passengers?" Arthur asked. "Deplane them," Jocelyn said. "Everyone gets off. I want a full audit of that cabin before we take off again." "Understood," Arthur said. He turned to Brenda, who was shaking behind the desk. "You, open the bridge. Now." I don't," Brenda stuttered. "Do it!" Arthur roared a sound so unlike his usual corporate demeanor that it startled even him. The jet bridge began to extend again, creeping back toward the plane like a reluctant tongue. Jocelyn watched. "Ms. Banks," Arthur said quietly. "Who was it? Who initiated the removal?" "A flight attendant named Gavin," Jocelyn listed without looking at a note. "A purser named Sheila, and a passenger named Bianca Montgomery." Arthur winced at the last name. "Montgomery, the construction magnate's wife. She's a major donor to the airline's charity wing." Jocelyn turned to Arthur, her eyes dark. "Not anymore. Today she learns that money doesn't buy the right to treat people like garbage. And as for the crew, they just evicted their new boss." The jet bridge locked onto the plane with a heavy thud. "Shall we?" Jocelyn asked, gesturing to the door. "After you, Ms. Banks," Arthur said. Jocelyn zipped up her hoodie. "No, I want to walk in last. Let them think it's just a mechanical issue. I want to see their faces when they realize the engine trouble is me." Inside Flight 402, the atmosphere was toxic. The sudden jolt of the brakes had spilled Bianca Montgomery's drink onto her cashmere coat. She was currently screaming at Gavin, who was on his knees with a napkin, frantically dabbing at the fabric. "You incompetent fool," Bianca shrieked. "First you let that person on board, and now you throw me around like a sack of potatoes. Why have we stopped?" "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Montgomery," Gavin stammered. "The pilot said it's a momentary hold, probably traffic control." "Well, tell them to move," Bianca huffed. "I have a dinner reservation in London." Sheila the purser marched down the aisle, her face grim. She had just spoken to the captain. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice tight, "we have been ordered to return to the gate. There is an administrative discrepancy that needs to be resolved." "Discrepancy?" a man in row 2 shouted. "We were taxiing what discrepancy?" "Please remain seated," Sheila barked. "We will have more information shortly." The plane reconnected with the gate. The fasten seatbelt sign flickered off, but the ominous ding of the intercom signaled something worse. The cockpit door opened. Captain Miller, a veteran pilot with a grey moustache and an ego to match, stepped out. He looked confused. "Sheila Ground Operations just told me to shut down the engines. They said the flight is suspended. What happened back here? Did that passenger you kicked off call the FAA?" "She was nobody, Captain," Sheila insisted. "Just some troublemaker. She couldn't have grounded a flight. It must be a security issue." The boarding door opened. Gavin straightened his tie, expecting the gate agent, or maybe a mechanic. Instead, Arthur Pendleton walked in. The colour drained from Gavin's face. Every employee at Aura Atlantic knew Arthur Pendleton. He was the man who signed the checks. He was the man who appeared in the training videos. "Mr. Pendleton," Gavin squeaked. "Sir." "What a surprise. We weren't expecting you." Arthur ignored him. He stepped aside, making room for the team of executives behind him. They filed into the first-class cabin, filling the aisle with the smell of expensive cologne and fear. Captain Miller stepped forward. "Mr. Pendleton, this is highly irregular. We are behind schedule. I need an explanation." "You'll get one, Captain," Arthur said, his voice grim. "But first, I need everyone to sit down, crew included. Sit down." Sheila scoffed, her instincts to dominate kicking in. "We have a service to prep. We can't just sit down." Arthur's voice cracked like a whip. Sheila sat on the jump seat, stunned. Gavin leaned against the galley wall. Bianca Montgomery, sensing a shift in the power dynamic, cleared her throat. "Arthur," she called out, waving her hand. "Arthur, darling." "Over here. It's Bianca. Bianca Montgomery. Thank goodness you're here. Your staff is appalling. And the turbulence on the ground unacceptable. I expect a full refund and a personal apology." Arthur looked at Bianca. There was no warmth in his eyes. "Mrs. Montgomery, please be quiet," Bianca gasped. "Excuse me." "You heard me," Arthur said. He turned to the open door. "Ms. Banks, the cabin is secured." The entire cabin turned to look at the door. Jocelyn walked in. She hadn't changed. She was still wearing the hoodie, the leggings, the sneakers. She still had her braids, but the way she walked onto the plane was different. Before she had walked with the quiet dignity of a passenger. Now she walked with the weight of an owner. She stopped in the center of the first-class cabin, standing right between seat 1A and seat 1K. Gavin's jaw dropped. He looked from Jocelyn to Arthur, and the pieces began to click together in a horrifying puzzle. "You," Gavin whispered. Jocelyn looked at him. "Me." She turned to Sheila. "You asked me to leave because I was disrupting the aesthetic of the cabin. You told me I was a security threat." Sheila swallowed hard, her face pale. "Ma'am, I was just following. Based on the customer complaint." "We have protocols." "Protocol," Jocelyn repeated. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out the red file. She dropped it onto Bianca Montgomery's lap. "What is this?" Bianca asked, recoiling from the folder. "That," Jocelyn said, addressing the whole cabin, "is the acquisition contract. As of 9:00 a.m. this morning, Stratosphere Logistics owns Aura Atlantic. And as the majority shareholder and new CEO of Stratosphere, I own this plane. I own this seat. I own the uniform you are wearing." Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Captain Miller took off his hat. You are Jocelyn Banks." "I am," Jocelyn said. "And Captain, I'm curious. When your purser told you she was removing a paid first-class passenger for no reason other than the color of her skin and the complaints of a bigot, did you ask why? Did you check the manifest?" I trust my crew to handle the cabin," the captain stammered. "That was your first mistake," Jocelyn said. She turned to Bianca. "Mrs. Montgomery, you wanted seat 1A. You have it. Enjoy it for the next 1 minute. Because you are never flying Aura Atlantic again." "You can't do that," Bianca shrieked, standing up. Your husband's construction firm has a contract to renovate our Terminal C lounge," Jocelyn interrupted. "I'm cancelling it. Effective immediately. Breach of morality clause. We don't do business with racists." Bianca fell back into the seat, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Jocelyn turned to Gavin and Sheila. "Badge, now." "Ms. Banks, please," Gavin pleaded, tears welling in his eyes. "I didn't know. If I had known who you were, that," Jocelyn said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream, "is exactly the problem. If I had been in a suit, if I had been white, or if I had been famous, you would have treated me with respect. But because I looked like a regular black woman, you treated me like trash. You don't respect people, Gavin. You respect power. And you don't deserve to wield either." She held out her hand. Trembling, Gavin unpinned his silver wings. He placed them in her palm. Sheila, looking defiant but defeated, did the same. "Get off my plane," Jocelyn said. "And you," she pointed to the captain. "You're suspended pending an investigation into your lack of oversight. Grab your flight bag." The scene was chaotic. The first-class passengers were filming on their phones. The economy passengers in the back were craning their necks. "Arthur," Jocelyn said, turning to the executive, "this flight is cancelled. Rebook everyone in economy on partner airlines with full compensation and a $1,000 voucher. The first-class passengers, well, they can wait. I want a full debrief in the tarmac office in 10 minutes. "Yes, Ms. Banks." Jocelyn looked at Bianca one last time. "You can keep the seat, Bianca, but the plane isn't going anywhere." Jocelyn turned and walked off the jet bridge for the second time that day. But this time she didn't leave as a victim. She left as the storm. The tarmac office at JFK Airport wasn't actually on the tarmac. It was a suspended glass conference room overlooking the runway usually reserved for visiting dignitaries or emergency coordination. Today, it was a courtroom. Jocelyn sat at the head of the long mahogany table. The room was silent save for the hum of the server banks in the corner and the distant roar of engines outside. To her right sat Arthur Pendleton, typing furiously into a secure terminal. To her left stood 3 members of the Aura Atlantic legal team, who had arrived with the speed of sharks smelling blood. Standing in the center of the room, looking like children called to the principal's office, were Gavin, Sheila, and Captain Miller. They had been stripped of their badges. Their lanyards lay in a pile in the center of the table, a plastic graveyard of their careers. Let's review the timeline, Jocelyn said, not looking up from the tablet in front of her. At 08:15, Bianca Montgomery boarded. At 08:17, she demanded a seat that was not hers. At 08:20, Gavin, you approached me. Gavin flinched. He looked smaller without his blazer, which he had nervously taken off. Ms. Banks, I swear the training manual says to prioritize Platinum members. It says, I wrote the manual, Gavin. Arthur interrupted, his voice tired. The manual says to prioritize Platinum members for upgrades when seats are available. It does not say to evict paid first-class passengers to satisfy a whim. It explicitly forbids displacement based on visual discomfort. She said she felt threatened. Sheila interjected, her voice shrill. She was still trying to cling to the wreckage of her authority. As the purser, it is my call. If a passenger claims they feel unsafe, I have to act. You were wearing a hoodie. You were silent. It was suspicious. Jocelyn slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were dark, unreadable pools. Suspicious. Tell me, Sheila, if I had been a white woman in yoga pants and a hoodie, would I have been suspicious, or would I have just been comfortable? Sheila opened her mouth, then closed it. The trap was obvious, but she had already walked into it. We checked the logs, one of the lawyers. A sharp-faced man named Preston said. He slid a piece of paper across the table. Sheila, in your 15 years flying for Aura, you have removed 12 passengers from first class. Every single one of them was a person of color. You have a 100% eviction rate for minorities. The room went dead silent. Sheila's face turned the color of ash. That's circumstantial, she whispered. It's a pattern, Jocelyn corrected, and it's a liability. But that's not the worst part. Jocelyn tapped the tablet. A video feed appeared on the large screen behind her. It was footage from the jet bridge camera, time-stamped 20 minutes prior to the incident. In the video, Bianca Montgomery was standing with her husband, Charles. She was handing an envelope to Captain Miller. The captain, who had been standing stoically with his arms crossed, suddenly went rigid. Captain Miller, Jocelyn said, her voice dropping an octave. Would you like to explain why the spouse of a passenger was handing you a sealed envelope before a scheduled flight? It was a tip, Miller stammered. A holiday bonus. The Montgomerys are generous. A $5,000 tip, Jocelyn asked. In cash? We scanned the envelope when you went through the unexpected secondary screening I ordered 10 minutes ago. Miller looked at the floor. That wasn't a tip, Jocelyn said. That was a bribe, and it wasn't for good service. It was for cargo. The twist hung in the air like smoke. Gavin and Sheila looked at the captain in horror. They had been playing a game of petty racism, unaware they were pawns in a federal crime. Open the red file, Arthur. Page 42, Jocelyn commanded. Arthur projected a document onto the screen. It was a cargo manifest for Flight 402. Bianca Montgomery wasn't just flying to London for dinner, Jocelyn explained, standing up and walking toward the window. Her husband, Charles Montgomery, owns a construction firm, but Stratosphere Logistics, my company, recently uncovered that his firm has been using Aura Atlantic flights to bypass customs for high-value, undeclared gemstones, diamonds mostly. Industrial grade, but worth millions. She turned back to the trembling crew. Bianca insisted on seat 1A because the panel under the window in 1A has a maintenance hatch that leads directly to the avionics bay, Jocelyn revealed. It's a design flaw in the 777, one that Captain Miller here was paid to ignore. She wasn't checking her makeup, Gavin. She was going to drop a package into the bay to be retrieved by a corrupt handler in Heathrow. Gavin looked like he was going to be sick. I I was just moving a seat. I didn't know about diamonds. Ignorance is not a defense when you enable corruption, Jocelyn said. You saw a black woman and assumed she was the problem. You didn't look at the white woman and ask why she was so desperate for a specific wall panel. Jocelyn leaned forward, placing her hands on the table. Captain Miller, the FBI, is waiting for you downstairs. You're facing charges for smuggling and endangering the safety of an aircraft. Sheila, you're being terminated for cause, and we are handing your file over to the Civil Rights Division. You'll never work in the sky again. And Gavin, Jocelyn looked at the young man. He was weeping silently. You're just a fool, Jocelyn said, her voice softening slightly, but with no less edge. You wanted to be near power so badly, you let it blind you. You're fired. No severance. And I'm blacklisting you from every airline in the Stratosphere Alliance. She waved her hand. Get them out of my sight. Security guards entered and escorted the 3 former employees out. As the door closed, the silence returned. That takes care of the help, Arthur said, wiping sweat from his brow. But we have a bigger problem. Bianca. Where is she? Jocelyn asked. She's in the VIP lounge, Arthur said. She's screaming at everyone, and she just posted a video on social media. It's trending. Jocelyn smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Good. Let her scream. Let her build the stage. Because when she falls, I want the whole world to hear the impact. The Aura Atlantic VIP lounge was designed to be a sanctuary. Soft jazz, free-flowing Scotch and velvet armchairs. But right now, it felt like a bunker under siege. Bianca Montgomery stood in the center of the room, holding her phone up like a weapon. She was live streaming. I'm being held hostage, she shouted into the camera, the filter smoothing out her frantic expression. The new management of this airline is discriminatory against wealth. Can you believe it? They kicked me off my flight, stole my seat, and now they're holding my luggage. This is a violation of my human rights. Behind her, nervous lounge attendants tried to calm her down, but she swatted them away. Don't touch me. I am calling my lawyer. I am calling the senator. In the corner of the lounge, sitting in a secluded booth, Charles Montgomery watched his wife with eyes that were cold and calculating. He wasn't live streaming. He was on a burner phone. The pilot is compromised, Charles whispered into the phone. The package is still on her person. We need to extract her. No, the deal is off. Just get us out of here before they check the bags. He hung up and stood adjusting his suit. He walked over to Bianca and grabbed her wrist hard. Stop it, Bea, he hissed. Put the phone away. We're leaving. Leaving? Bianca pulled back. I'm not leaving until that woman is fired. Do you know who she is? Some nobody named Banks. She ruined my flight. She is not a nobody, Charles said through gritted teeth. She owns the airline, you idiot. And if you don't shut up, she's going to own us. Before Bianca could respond, the lounge doors swung open. But it wasn't the police. It was Jocelyn Banks. She was alone. No security. No Arthur. Just her hoodie and the red file tucked under her arm. The lounge went silent. Passengers lowered their forks. The bartender stopped shaking a martini. Jocelyn walked straight into the center of the room, stopping 5 feet from Bianca and Charles. Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery, Jocelyn said, her voice calm and projecting clearly. I believe you have something that belongs to the authorities. Bianca laughed, a high, nervous sound. The audacity. You come in here dressed like a street urchin and accuse me I have 3 million followers watching this live. I know. Jocelyn said, glancing at the phone Bianca was still holding. "Hello, everyone. I'm Jocelyn Banks. I'm the CEO." The chat on Bianca's live stream exploded. "CEO, OMG. She owns the place." "You're lying," Bianca spat. "You're a fraud." "Charles Ball," Jocelyn said, shifting her gaze to the husband. "Tell her." Charles Montgomery looked at Jocelyn. He saw the file under her arm. He saw the specific red tag on the corner, the color code for Internal Audit Level 5. He knew exactly what was in there. "B," Charles said, his voice trembling. "Put the phone down." "No," Bianca screamed. "I want justice." "You want justice?" Jocelyn asked. "Okay." Jocelyn opened the file. She pulled out a single photograph. She held it up for the room and for Bianca's camera to see. It was a grainy surveillance photo from a hangar. It showed Charles Montgomery shaking hands with a man known to Interpol as the Broker. And next to them, holding a small velvet pouch, was Bianca. 3 months ago, Jocelyn said. Flight 309 to Zurich. You insisted on seat 1A that time too. You claimed you had a migraine and needed the dark. But really you were smuggling conflict diamonds out of Sierra Leone using my airline as a mule. Bianca froze. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the carpet. That's absurd, Bianca whispered. They were earrings, my own earrings. We checked the maintenance logs, Jocelyn continued, relentless. Every time you fly, the panel in 1A is found loose. Every time. You're not just a rude passenger, Bianca. You're a smuggler, and your husband is the ringleader. Charles lunged. It was a desperate, foolish move. He reached inside his jacket, perhaps for a weapon, perhaps just to grab the file. But Jocelyn didn't flinch. Before Charles could take 2 steps, the lounge staff, who had been briefed by Arthur, tackled him. 2 bartenders and a concierge pinned the billionaire to the floor. "Get off him!" Bianca shrieked, kicking at the staff. "Bianca Montgomery!" A voice boomed from the doorway. 2 federal marshals stepped in, followed by the local police. "You are under arrest for federal smuggling conspiracy to commit fraud and violation of the RICO Act," the marshal said, holding up handcuffs. Bianca looked at the handcuffs, then at Jocelyn. The arrogance finally broke. The mask of the socialite crumbled, leaving a terrified woman who realized her money had no power here. "Jocelyn, Ms. Banks," Bianca pleaded, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "Please. It was a mistake. I didn't know. Charles made me do it. I can apologize. I'll make a donation, a big one." Jocelyn looked down at her. "You can't buy your way out of this, Bianca. You treated people like they were invisible. You thought you were above the rules because of who you married and what you wore. But gravity applies to everyone, even in first class." The officers grabbed Bianca's arms. As they dragged her out, screaming, the other passengers in the lounge stood up. Slowly, one by one, they started to clap. It wasn't a polite golf clap. It was a thunderous applause. They were cheering for the end of the entitlement. They were cheering for the woman in the hoodie. Jocelyn watched them go. She felt tired. But the work wasn't done. She turned to the stunned room. "I apologize for the disturbance," she said. "Please enjoy your evening. Drinks are on the house." She walked out of the lounge, leaving the applause behind her. She needed to make a call. There was one more loose end to tie up. The man who had enabled Charles Montgomery, from the inside, the former CEO she had just replaced. She pulled out her phone. "Arthur," she said, "the Montgomerys are in custody. Initiate Phase 2. We're releasing the internal comms. I want every board member who signed off on Charles's contracts exposed by Horning." "Ms. Banks," Arthur said, his voice sounding relieved. "You might want to check the news first. The video, it's everywhere." "Which video, Bianca's?" "No," Arthur said. "Yours. A passenger on the plane recorded your speech to the crew. I own this seat. I own this uniform. It has 10 million views in an hour. They're calling you the boss of the skies." Jocelyn stopped in the middle of the concourse. She looked at the reflection in the window. The hoodie, the braids, the determination. She hadn't just cleaned up a flight. She had started a revolution. The sun was rising over Manhattan, casting long, bloody streaks of light across the glass skyline. But inside the headquarters of Stratosphere Logistics, it felt like midnight. The emergency board meeting had been called for 6:00 a.m. It was now 6:15, and the conference room on the 50th floor smelled of fear and stale coffee. 12 men and women sat around the oval table. These were the titans of the industry people who controlled shipping lanes, airline fleets, and cargo hubs. Usually, they were the ones making people wait. Today they sat in terrified silence, staring at the empty chair at the head of the table. They had all seen the news. Bianca Montgomery's arrest was trending globally. The video of Jocelyn Banks dismantling the crew of Flight 402 had been viewed 40 million times in 12 hours. The stock price of Aura Atlantic had dipped initially, then skyrocketed as the public rallied behind the CEO of the people. But the people in this room weren't worried about the stock price. They were worried about the red file. The doors opened. Jocelyn Banks walked in. She had finally changed out of her travel clothes. She wore a sharp navy blue power suit that looked like it had been tailored from a thunderstorm. Arthur Pendleton walked a step behind her, carrying a stack of documents that looked heavy enough to crush a man. Jocelyn didn't say good morning. She walked to the head of the table, placed her hands on the leather chair, and looked at the faces before her. "Gentlemen, ladies," Jocelyn began, her voice echoing in the silent room. "Yesterday, I removed a cancer from one of our aircraft. Today, I'm here to treat the rest of the patient." "Jocelyn," spoke up Richard Sterling, the chairman of the board. He was a man in his 60s with silver hair and a smile that usually charmed investors. Today, the smile looked plastered on. "Let's not be dramatic. The Montgomery incident was unfortunate, yes, a PR nightmare, but we can spin this. We can say you were conducting a secret shopper experiment. It shows initiative." Jocelyn looked at Sterling. She didn't blink. "A secret shopper experiment. Is that what we're calling federal crimes now, Richard?" Sterling's smile faltered. "I don't know what you mean." "Arthur," Jocelyn said. Arthur stepped forward and placed a single sheet of paper in front of Sterling. "That," Jocelyn said, "is a bank transfer record from the Cayman Islands. It shows a deposit of $500,000 into an account held by Blue Sky Consulting. That's your shell company, isn't it, Richard?" Sterling turned pale. "This is preposterous. Private consulting is perfectly legal." "Not when the client is Charles Montgomery's construction firm," Jocelyn countered. "And not when the payment is dated 2 days before you personally overruled the safety inspector who flagged the avionics bay in our 707 fleet." A gasp went around the table. The other board members looked at Sterling as if he were radioactive. "You knew," Jocelyn said, her voice rising. "You knew Charles was using the maintenance hatches to smuggle diamonds. You knew Bianca was demanding specific seats to facilitate the drop, and you let it happen. You jeopardized the safety of every passenger on every flight just to pad your retirement fund." "It was business," Sterling shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "The airline was bleeding cash. Montgomery's contracts kept us afloat during the recession. I did what I had to do to save the company." "You didn't save the company," Jocelyn said coldly. "You sold its soul." She turned to the rest of the board. "I have evidence implicating 3 other members of this board in similar schemes. Kickbacks, bribes, ignoring safety protocols to save pennies." Jocelyn signaled to the security team waiting by the door. "Richard Sterling, you are removed as chairman effective immediately. The SEC and the FBI are waiting in your office. I suggest you don't make them wait." As Sterling was escorted out, shouting threats and obscenities, the room felt lighter, yet infinitely more tense. Jocelyn sat down. She looked at the remaining 8 members. "Now," she said, opening a folder, "let's talk about the future. Aura Atlantic is going to change. No more platinum elite shielding for abusers. No more turning a blind eye to racism in the cabin. We are going to implement a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination from passengers and crew." A board member named Eleanor raised her hand tentatively. "Jocelyn, the investors. They'll say we're alienating our high-net-worth clients. Bianca Montgomery's friends spend millions with us." Jocelyn smiled. "Let them leave. Because for every billionaire bigot we lose, we're gaining 1 million loyal customers who want to fly with an airline that has a spine. Look at the numbers, Elena. Bookings are up 300% since the video went viral. People are tired of the old way. We're building the new way." She leaned back in her chair. "We are going to be the gold standard. Not of luxury, but of integrity. And anyone in this room who doesn't like that, the door is open. But if you stay, you play by my rules. Protocol 0 is in effect permanently." The board members looked at each other. Slowly, one by one, they nodded. They had seen the shark eat the whale. They weren't going to argue with the shark 6 months later. The wind whipped across the tarmac of the private airfield in upstate New York, biting and cold. It was a far cry from the heated jet bridges of JFK. Gavin zipped his neon orange safety vest higher up his neck. His hands were raw from the cold, his knuckles cracked. He grabbed the heavy luggage from the conveyor belt and tossed it onto the cart. "Move it, rookie," his supervisor yelled from the truck cab. "We got a cargo plane landing in 10. Don't make them wait." I'm going," Gavin muttered. He wasn't a flight attendant anymore. After the blacklist went into effect, no airline would touch him. Not even the budget carriers. His name was radioactive. He had lost his apartment in the city, sold his car, and was now working as a ramp agent for a freight company loading boxes of frozen fish and machine parts. He looked up at the sky. A sleek Aura Atlantic jet soared overhead, banking toward the city. It gleamed in the sunlight. He used to be inside those planes. He used to drink champagne in the galley. Now he was just part of the machinery, invisible and cold. He thought about Jocelyn Banks. He thought about the moment he chose Bianca Montgomery over her. He thought about it every single day. The Federal Correctional Institution, Danbury. Bianca Montgomery sat on the edge of her bunk. The cell was 6 feet by 8 feet. The walls were painted a depressing shade of beige. There was no first class here. There were no hot towels. There was no Gavin to fetch her water. "Montgomery!" A guard shouted through the bars. "Legal visit!" Bianca stood up, smoothing her grey jumpsuit. She walked to the visitation room, her heart fluttering. Maybe it was the appeal. Maybe Charles had found a way. She sat behind the plexiglass. Her lawyer, a tired-looking public defender, their assets had been frozen, so the high-priced sharks had fled, sat on the other side. "Well," Bianca asked, her voice raspy. She hadn't had a proper skincare routine in months. Her face looked haggard, lines of stress etched deep. "The judge denied the bail motion again," the lawyer said, not making eye contact. And with the new evidence from the Aura Atlantic board, Richard Sterling turned state's witness. He gave them everything, Bianca. The diamonds, the bribes, the dates. Bianca felt the room spin. "So, what does that mean?" "It means they're offering a plea deal," the lawyer said. 15 years. If you don't take it and we go to trial, you're looking at 25. 15 years, Bianca whispered. I can't. I have a gala in the fall. I have a life. You had a life, Mrs. Montgomery, the lawyer said, packing up his briefcase. You threw it away for a seat on a plane. Bianca watched him leave. She looked at her reflection in the plexiglass. The woman looking back wasn't the Queen of New York anymore. She was just an inmate number. She put her hand to the glass and began to sob. JFK, Airport, Terminal 4. The terminal was bustling. It was the holiday season, and the airport was a chaotic symphony of reunions. Jocelyn Banks walked through the concourse. She wasn't wearing a suit today. She was back in her hoodie and leggings, a backpack slung over one shoulder. She walked up to the gate for Flight 402 to London. "Welcome to Aura Atlantic," the gate agent said brightly. It was a young woman smiling genuinely. She looked at Jocelyn's boarding pass. "Oh, Miss Banks, seat 1A. We have you all set." "Thank you," Jocelyn said. "Would you like to board with the first-class group?" the agent asked. Jocelyn looked around. She saw a young mother struggling with a stroller and two crying toddlers near the economy line. The woman looked exhausted, on the verge of tears. "Actually," Jocelyn said, handing the pass back, "can you do me a favor? Upgrade that mother and her kids to 1A and the surrounding suite. Put me in her seat in economy." The agent's eyes widened. "Ma'am? Are you sure it's a 7-hour flight?" "I'm sure." Jocelyn smiled. "I have some reading to do. I don't need the leg room." The agent processed the change, beaming. "You're the best, Ms. Banks." Jocelyn walked over to the mother. "Excuse me. The airline has a surplus of space today. They want you to have the suite." The mother looked at Jocelyn, shocked. "Me? Are you serious? I can't pay for that." "It's already paid for," Jocelyn said, winking. "Just pay it forward someday." As the mother cried tears of relief and hurried her children onto the plane, Jocelyn took her place at the back of the line. She watched the plane through the window. It was the same machine, but it felt different. It felt lighter. Karma wasn't just about punishment. It was about balance. Bianca Montgomery was in a codge of her own making. Gavin was out in the cold. But here in the terminal, a mother was getting a break she desperately needed. Jocelyn boarded the plane, took her seat in row 34, and pulled out her book. The engines roared to life, a sound of pure potential. She was the boss. But today, she was just a passenger. And the view from here was perfect. The story of Jocelyn Banks serves as a powerful reminder that true power isn't about the clothes you wear or the seat you demand. It's about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. Bianca and the crew of Flight 402 learned the hard way that when you judge someone by their appearance, you might just be judging your own executioner. In a world obsessed with status, character remains the only currency that never devalues. If you enjoyed this story of instant justice and corporate takedowns. Please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder to be kind, and comment below. What would you have done if you were in Jocelyn's shoes? Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.